Is that Hathor?
Yeah, Isis.
Isis
And
Christ is
Hathor.
Hathor.
Yeah.
So Isis is the mother, is that right?
Yeah. This one's kind of fun because this, usually we will see in ours, we're seeing the depiction of the male going through, like if you have Annie in the Book of the Dead. But this is one of the ones that had the women on it that I got there. And so here is a woman that she's being initiated into these two horns at the top can represent the two pillars, the two horns, and then the sun rising in the middle of them is that rising, it's the equinox. It's a special time of year when things are done. So she's wearing this crown, which is identifying her. Probably any priestess would wear this, clothing, like a priest would wear his clothing to show that he's the high priest. She's wearing her clothing. She's bringing the initiate. The initiate is wearing the two feathers of light and truth. She's a follower of light and truth. And behind her is her daughter, also wearing the feather of light and truth, holding on to the lotus. The lotus is like the bride's bouquet, right? It's a flower showing its life and re-life. And then they are taking her, and now this is her in her robes. Now here she is in her sacred robes, and she's being presented to the mother. The mother is on the throne. She has her wisdom snake. There's so much. She has the little rattle, the awakening. Oh, this is good.
The snake is wisdom?
The snake has to do with, there's good snakes and there's bad snakes.
Yeah.
This is a good snake. So this snake is kind of like, even we would, like the snake that goes up and enlightens your mind, your third eye, your crown chakra. You are awakened. And so you can receive. So that's why the king and the queen would have that. So she's coming up and she's being initiated into a temple ceremony, and she's being presented to the queen or the mother. So this is what this is actually symbolizing. But the problem is we have archaeologists and we have sociologists. Yeah, this is so great.
It's a different
I don't have this plug.
Yeah.
Oh, rats. All right, we might have to go quick.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get my animation start from the beginning. Okay, so just to show you, we're going to see the parallels. And that's why, Mormons love going to Egypt, because they can see the parallels with the robes and the words and the sacred embrace and the certain hand motions and mudras, they would call it in other cultures. But this is what is telling you. And we talked about Egypt, so I just kind of wanted to bring this.
You're
Yes.
covering those recorders, so
Thank you.
it'd be useful if it wasn't there.
All right. There we go. Oh, battery. Here we go. Okay, so I had heard about Chaco Canyon, and I knew it was down in the Four Quarters area, but I didn't really know much about it. But I had been to Machu Picchu about a year ago, and I just thought, I just really feel kind of a desire to go there. So I think, months and months ago, maybe a year or two ago, I watched a little thing. It was Robert Redford. Anyway, go fast. And Robert Redford had a special, and it's called The Mysteries of Chaco Canyon. And what happened is people had been there and gone through there, but they didn't realize that there was archaeoastronomy connections where on the equinox, I'll show you. We'll just talk about it. But what I want to show you is I think this is an ancient temple complex and what happened to it. All right, but it starts at a party. So Nicole had a party. It was her birthday party. And she said, "You want to come to my house for my birthday party?" And I'm like, "Sure, I want to come." So this was last year, 2022. That should be 22.
Okay.
Sorry about that. This is last year in October. And I didn't know that from sunset to the next day is Rosh Hashanah. I didn't know it was Rosh Hashanah, which is the head of the year or the new year. And so I had a very, very vivid dream. She said she's going to have a guy come and he'll do the crystals, the sound bath. And so I take my little blanket, I'm laying there, and I'm just like, oh, this is going to be so great. So I'm listening. Take a couple deep breaths, and I'm like, oh, I'll just imagine myself by a beach. I'll just be by a beach. And all of a sudden, I was taken up. I mean, not really, but in my mind. And all of a sudden, I was flying over red rocks, like in the desert. And I'm thinking to myself, no, a beach. I would like to be by a beach or a lake. Nope, I'm just flying over the desert and red rocks, which is not my favorite climate. And so as I was flying, it was light, I could see, but it became dark. And I was flying kind of like a drone. I was just up in the air, just like looking down at things. And then all of a sudden I get to this place and I look down and I'm above. There's building and there's dancing. And well, let me just read what I said so I don't miss anything. But anyway, I noticed that there were women dancing in a circle. I don't know how many women, 10, 12, I don't know how many there were, but they were just dancing and they were swirling. And as they swirled, their skirts went out like these pancakes. They were real big skirts. And on the skirts, they were darker. They were like red and blue, kind of a crimson. But on the skirts were these big white flowers. And as they spun, you could see these white flowers. And in the center of the group was this kind of roundish Indian woman. And she was wearing, that's why I brought this, she was wearing kind of a red, shawl kind of thing buckled in. Yeah. And on her arm was this very large bird. It's kind of red bird. So, and the bird had some blue and yellow. Huh?
A real bird?
A real bird. A real big bird. And so and then all of a sudden I was gently just put down and there was a group of people on both sides of me. I'm just kind of looking at them. And they were wearing whitish clothing. It wasn't white like our temp clothing, but like hand woven, but white woven clothing, kind of like muslin. And I noticed that most appeared to be men and women in couples. That's just what I noticed. But I'm not sure. I didn't really spend a lot of time looking at that because I was watching this book. Then the dream continued. And as I listened and I looked upwards, I saw in the heavens, in the sky, just like this blue, it's a black inky sky, and just like a swirl in a coffee cup of cream, but it was a little lighter blue and a little twinkly, kind of like maybe like on a Disney movie or something. I'm like, what's that? And then, it was above the dancers. And I'm thinking into my mind, oh, I wonder if they're swirling the heavens. By their dancing, they're swirling the heavens. This is really interesting. And then, these people. Oh, okay. And as the women started to come to their conclusion, the woman in the middle in red, she turned a couple times, and then she let go of that bird, and the bird just went and just up in a spiral towards that other spiral. And I was just sitting there, kind of amazed. And then all of a sudden, I was lifted up again. And I just started flying north. I have no idea how I knew in my mind, but I knew it was north. And I started flying, and it was just inky. And I'm looking up. I kind of feel like presence of maybe people or something here, but I can't see anything. And I just look up, and the sky is black as I've ever seen, and with stars in it. And I'm just amazed. And then I look back onto the earth, and the earth is black as I've ever seen it. Like the world just turned off their lights. But I could see dots of lights that kind of mirrored the heavens. Not as many as were in the heavenly stars, but on the earth, bright ones and more dim ones, kind of like you look in the sky. So that's it. And I was kind of amazed. And then I saw the earth. Yeah, that's right. There were no towns I could see. There was no big thing, but these little star-like lights on the earth, some brighter than others, and not as many as in the sky. Right. And so it was just kind of mirroring the sky above it. So then the next thing I knew, I was back in the sound bath, laying on my little pad, listening to this musical artist coming to the end. And I was just in shock. And he said, now as you conclude your interdimensional, and I'm like, interdimensional? And so I get up and I'm like, Nicole, did you just have something amazing happen to you? She's like, no. And I go up to the guy, I go, do people have like strange dreams? He goes, oh, lots of things happen. I'm like, really strange? I just can't figure it out. And he's like, well, different things happen. So then I had to plan a trip to Chaco Canyon. But the next day, what happened, I really didn't know it was Rosh Hashanah. The next day, my husband's saying, I'm going out with my Jewish friend for Rosh Hashanah. And I'm like, it's Rosh Hashanah? I called Nicole, did you know it was Rosh Hashanah? And she goes, yeah, Robin, it wasn't my actual birthday. I picked Rosh Hashanah. And I'm like, what? So anyway, that's why I'm wearing my little squash blossom thing and my little pants for the turquoise, because I'm going to tell you this amazing story. So I had heard of Chaco Canyon. I was curious to go there and explore. I had watched that Robert Redford special about astronomical alignments and buildings. And after studying temples, it's just boom, 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 boom. This is a temple because that building is totally aligned. So we planned a trip. 3 couples were going to go down, but it all falls apart. And then at the last minute, myself and Felice were just like, what the heck, let's go. We threw in some sleeping bags and camping gear, and away we went. And we stopped on our way down to Mesa Verde on our way down, and we stayed then one night in a hotel, and then on to Chaco Canyon early Saturday morning, April 30th. And we didn't even plan it, but it was a night with no moon. And this will become important later on. Okay, the canyon is huge. There's this big thing called Fajada Butte, kind of at the entrance of this canyon. And around the canyon are these high mesas. There's 10 or 12 mesas above it. And to the south, there's a dip where people would eventually come through. It's like a pilgrimage site. And then there's a dry creek bed there, and there are 14 large structures. I mean, they cover acres. So this is big, huge. And it covers a 9-mile loop as you go in and around. And there's another one further out, and there's another one further out that you would have to hike to. 7 miles out or whatever, 2 miles out. So we explored most of the day, and but there was much more to be explored, and still much more that I would like to go back down and explore. But by large, and I mean by large, I was just thinking, one may cover an acre to several acres with masonry carved stones. So what I'm going to show you is one building. Maybe I said it right here. So this one is a rendition of what they've drawn out of the ruins. So they think that Pueblo Benito, they call it, or Beautiful City, was built in about 850 AD. This one of the 14 sites, this is the largest one, but it covers over 3 acres. And it has millions of hand-cut sandstone carvings. I'm like, where's the quarry for this? And he goes, it's about 20 miles over there. I'm like, they hand-cut them over there and hauled all their perfect bricks and stones, and they built this. Amazing. And it had 5 stories high. The walls at the bottom were very thick. The next one, like going up. So they knew from the beginning they were going to be building something. So architecturally, they knew it. The one flat side on that D is an east-west alignment. So remember the horns and the sun rising perfectly to the east? When that day on the equinox happens, where it's 12 hours a day and 12 hours of night, and the sun rises right up and over, the line would rise on the one side of the line of the D and set in the west on the other side of the D. And it marked the day of creation, the first day. Okay? You still can't see?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Could this be Mantina?
Absolutely. Could it be Nephite? Absolutely.
This is a rendition of something.
This is a rendition, but it's still there, but the buildings aren't 5 stories high anymore. That back wall that you see right there, all those a huge chunk of it fell in 1942 and
The
crushed.
mountain itself?
There's
Part of
lots
it.
of YouTubes if you put in Chaco Canyon.
It's interesting to me that it's an arch, like a doorway arch.
An arch.
And
Wait.
why would they put one tree?
It's like a half
Okay,
an
they
almond.
found so this was from the Forest Service. This is what they thought it looked like. They found one giant log of a tree, and so they thought, this tree must have been here. So they drew one tree, but it was a symbolic tree. This structure had over 230,000 timbers in it. There are no trees in Chaco Canyon. They would have to go 60 miles to cut down these trees and haul 200,000 into the valley to build this.
They put them on the layers to
Yeah,
go high.
they built these kivas, the
Like
circles
steam
you see.
bills.
They will
Steam.
build layers and layers over them with timbers. And then they go and they do their ceremony down in the earth, and then they climb over the ladder, like a Jacob's ladder, over the fire and the smoke as they're purified. And then they come to this earth where they're going to learn higher things. So they think that tree was a ceremonial, it was a white pine or a special type of tree. The first archaeologists, they just found that big old tree and they couldn't figure out what it meant, so they just put it down into one of these deep kivas and made a ladder out of it. Like, ding
Well,
dong.
there's a sacred Native American ceremony called the Sundance, and they use a live tree, and they move that live tree every year to this place that they're going to do it. It's basically, it's a temple ceremony
Yeah.
in sorts.
So what you're seeing like a ceremony, but just given the people where they are and how they're going to teach it in different things. But this, up on top of Fajada Butte, they found, and this is what the story, if you look at that Robert Redford movie, they found this this spiral, and it's a very large spiral. It's 9 1/4 turns. And when the sun is exactly at the equinox, or the solstice, there's 2 big stones. And so they carved it under the big stones that had fallen off. So when the light comes through these giant stones that fell, on the equinox, it's a light dagger right through the center. And on the equinoxes, you can see right there, it's on the side, like the spring equinox and then the winter equinox. So there's 3 giant stones that fell, and the light, can you imagine the precision of figuring this out? It's like the cathedrals in Chartres Cathedral. On a certain day, there's a hole in the top, and it will hit exactly and then map something on the floor for you to know. So these are astronomers.
And
These
Saint-
are star
Saint Sulpice
priests.
one too does
What?
that. The Saint Sulpice one does that with the golden
Yeah,
thing that goes up
and they're
almost.
marking equinox and solstices.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And actually, our conference being in the spring and the fall, in April and October, is it's like a marker of our equinoxes.
And that's when Joseph saw God the Father in the spring. Moroni gave him the plates, or told him about the plates in the fall.
In the fall, and comes the same time on that same day
Mm-hmm.
for years. So here, there were thousands of pilgrims that would come. Oh, but what I want to tell you is this whole thing, after they look at it, they think only 70 people lived there. So they were like the priests who lived and maintained it. And then at these certain times of year, they would come in. There are over 300 apartment-type dwellings here, but they found the majority of them have no windows and had no fireplace. So it wasn't used in the winter to keep you warm, or in the summer.
Praying room or something.
There was a ceremonial room.
Yeah.
So just think of that, ceremonial room. That's what it has to be on the spring or the fall, equinox time. So this is how their markers were. This is a cross. So remember I told you the mesas around it, there's a dip on the southern side. And there is a road, an actual road that was built that's about 34 feet across, the size of the same, our highways, cleared of rocks. And it goes for miles, like 60 to 100 miles. One to the south and one to the north. And it's a north-south avenue. So to me, it seemed like if they were watching the sunrise or the sunset during that time, they just walk towards it, depending on which side they are. They will eventually hit that road, and then they follow the road into Chaco Canyon. So it's a marker, because it doesn't end at a city. There's no place for it. It has to be for the ceremonial gathering. So just like these ceremonial gatherings, they would have pilgrims come through, and there would be like 1,000 in the south. Oh man. Okay. The south, there's this keyhole, and so Felice is standing there, and there's this keyhole type shape. That's directly to the south. To the north, there's another one that points right across at Pueblo Benito, across the creek, across the area where they probably could do tents and all the rest. There are mounds of okay. There's another one that is further. So Pueblo Benito, you go up on the top, and then you keep going north, and there's another temple, and another site, and it's called Pueblo Alto. And there they found all of these clay pots, these ceremonial pots that were just broken. Thousands and thousands, heaps of broken pottery.
And alto means higher.
Alto,
Means
it's a higher
lower.
one. So I don't know if you can hear it even, but I'm going to play this little clip. This is going to be sad. So this is the largest kiva. It's 63 feet across. There are ceremonial things in the center, and these holes and markers. When the moon rises at a certain time, it goes through. Oh, here it is. I'm telling you, across the valley and up on the skyline, there's another city or another site. I'm trying to show it to you here. There's one of the pueblos. So we were just kind of exploring and figuring out, but you can see how high that bluff is. It's like I don't know.
Well, look
more
at the
than 100
cars.
feet.
You can see
Yeah.
little teeny vehicles, and it's huge.
Yeah, so you really don't get a sense of how big this is until you're there walking around. So at Pueblo Benito, it's huge. And it was there. I wondered, because I look at little pictures and books and stuff, and I can't imagine how big it is. So when I had that experience and I was looking down and I was seeing all these dancers, I'm like, where would they fit? I don't even know how this would work. But when I got there, everything's so massive, and there is an open courtyard area, and I'm like, oh, this is where they were dancing. This is the space. So I was so excited.
See those little things sticking out? That's the wood, and that would make the layer. That's what they
Yeah.
said in the videos. That's your floor. And then the next, see how high that is? And then a floor.
Yeah, and then there's another 5 stories high.
They look like Hebrew letters.
The shadow.
Where?
The shadow.
I know, they look like something special, but that is just the,
Where is it?
there we go. All right. But I was just kind of looking around and just looking at these kivas, and there are many, many kivas in that giant D. There's like 33 of them. And they're deep, and they all have these like special markings, and they would all have had huge timber roofs that are layered and then go up, and then you would climb out the hole. So this was all like a purification, cleansing, and then that dance, I think, was for the higher ordinances becoming changed again. So
That's a seat around it, like the synagogue
it is.
would have a seat.
It is. That is a seat.
On some of the videos, it will show the timber in there and show the ladder so that you can go back.
You can,
and
yeah. There's
climb.
some up at this other village. They
Yeah.
recreated it, but a lot of the times it's the circle of the kiva within a square. The circle in the square. Now, why would you build 2 walls and make all that extra effort, right? Just, it's incredible. They were teaching a lot of things.
Can I just mention that when men work and dance, it's their sweat offering, just like a sweat lodge, which is the womb of the mother. And women that birth, that's their sweat, the Creator's sweat for us.
So it's sacrifice, kind of on
It's the
both.
last sacrifice.
So in the whole area, they found 14 bodies, and the 14 bodies were found in one tomb at the bottom of a small one of those circles in Pueblo Benito. And in that tomb, they found that the 14 people were all related over a 300-year period of time through the matriarchal line. So it's probably a priest family. There were males and females that were found in that. There were also 26,000 pieces of turquoise. And this is one of the ones that they're showing, not this, but the one in the hole is the turquoise. And there was also the bones of a macaw. Interesting. And on their art, you can see on the stone, this is the macaw. And they found that they probably had enclosures, and there were some with like fireplace type thing to keep the enclosure warm, because a macaw comes from Central America and it needs about 50 degrees, and it would get below that. And they can live for about 80 years. That's something. So that was their sacred bird. So the red phoenix bird is the representation of a death and a rebirth. In Egypt, it was called the Ben bird. And the Ben bird was this, everything burns up, and then you're reborn a new creature, right? Harry Potter even showed us that, the phoenix, right? I need to tell you, when I went into the little store, there was a girl, and she was holding a little stuffed parrot, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go find this stuffed parrot. So I went, and there were no more stuffed parrots. But then I turned, and in the glass case, there was this. Is that the best?
Oh, wow.
The scarlet macaw, because they know that's where, and he's a little puppet. So I figure I can play with that one, but anyway. So you become burned fruit, like Isaiah says. All the dross is burned out of you. You've made, imagine the sacrifice to come to the middle. This is down in the Four Corners area in New Mexico. The sacrifice to travel, huge differences. The turquoise that they found was from 7 different states, meaning these people brought these in.
And Egypt has all the same blue, the same.
The blue, I had a real spiritual experience. Maybe afterwards I can tell you guys.
With the.
Anyway, do you
No,
see?
it was Mary Magdalene burning.
Yes.
Her story of the tree.
Yes, on the tree of life, she becomes burned fruit. But here is showing, this was on one of the, the statuary. I can't even remember where I found it, but it's the tree of life, right? They're partaking of the fruit of the tree. But then again, it's back to the tree, right? The cherubim, and they block you from the tree until you're worthy. Then you can go back past into the garden and then partake of that tree. And even above this, it shows like a phoenix out of the flames. Can you see that over there?
At the top, yeah.
So this is the story. This is the process. The Adam and Eve is the fall, but getting back into the garden, into the tree, to become burned fruit, that you can go back into the presence like the birds. You can fly. So her representing of this red blood bird and letting it go and went up into the heavens as the heavens were coming down to unite and open this portal for a ceremonial between husbands and wives in sacred rooms that they would break their pottery. They have special pottery. It's black and white pottery, and it shows here you would have to climb up this wall. So we will climb up this wall. It's pretty crazy. You can start climbing it, and then all of a sudden the people disappeared. And I'm like, where'd they go? And so you start the little trail, and you climb up, and you get to one of these huge slabs, like the size of a house, has fallen, and you go behind it, and you can touch both walls, and you can climb up this path and get to the top of this. And then from there, you can hike north to the place where they break their pottery. And so here's the next picture. We're climbing up that crack in the canyon. She's looking down at me, so this goes down to the floor of the canyon. And then we took one of us a selfie going up. But the reason I took it going up is right over her head is this pillar type thing. And on top of the pillar, it had been like carved out like a little hole. And when I passed it, I felt like it was for oil. It was for anointing. They would go up this mountain and they would anoint in some way. And then continue on up to the Alto, the higher temple, with their sacred pottery representing them, that they become broken pottery and they are reborn to this higher level. So here's the North Trail. It goes 60 miles long. Pueblo Alto, they've found thousands of broken pottery in piles. But it's a unique pottery that isn't found anywhere else. It's done on white, and it has the black image, and it's almost a mirror image. Do you see how it looks like it looks like a little temple coming up or stepping like a pyramid type thing, and the other way it looks like coming down. So it's almost like they're showing there's two ways to see yourself, right? You've got your spiritual and you've got your animal, both of these. But anyway, we didn't make it up all the way up to that one. Another friend did, but this is a picture of it. So Hugh Nibley, he said in a talk, you can look it up on YouTube if you want, it's Temples Everywhere by Hugh Nibley. And he said, sacred sites with similar temple themes are common themes. We've had over 200 years to really do comparative analysis of all the different religions. And the reason the temples were here on this earth was to see the person safely through this world. And the second reason was to secure him or her in the next life a place as a resurrected and exalted being. And they were a place to gather together on equinox, solstices, the day of creation, to start the creation drama all over again. As we enter the temple, we're told that we are as Adam and Eve. Our life here is as Adam and Eve. If Eve is like Heavenly Mother, we are to become and learn of her. And so that same thing goes back from prehistoric times that they don't even have writings like the Pyramid Tech. They know it existed before it was actually written down, to Christianity, the same theme. So you gather together at a central place. A lot of times they will say it's at the four corners of the earth. Interesting that four corners is actually down. And they would marry, they would reproduce, they would make promises, they would dance in circles. Think of the ordinance that's being made as you stand around the person in the middle who's kneeling on the altar. That, Nibley says, is very comparative to the upper room when the husbands and wives of his disciples were around him. And he said, say the words that I say, and then amen. And that they would dance around him. We see the Jewish ceremonies after the marriage. They hold up the bride and groom, and they dance around them, the ring dance of creation. So they do ceremonies to purify and to learn of the heavens. Chaco Canyon seems to be that place at the four corners of the world. It's on the highest plateau. It's about 6,500, 7,000 feet. That's why I could see the stars so clearly. You're up there in that crisp, cold air with no lights. It's one of maybe a handful of places in the world that is that black. And so the people take their telescopes out there. And anyway, and we know that the star priests recorded the sun, the moon, and the stars, and they kept these ancient traditions. And so a lot of times they say Abraham was a star priest because he came from Ur of Chaldea. Well, Chaldean astronomical stuff is where a lot of the astrology comes from, is Chaldea. But he was keeping that purely for the markings in the heavens. And so he kept those ancient traditions. The stars on a moonless night. There is, down at the same museum we were walking by, and there's a little gold plate. I should have taken a picture of it. And as I walked by the little gold plate, they said they found lots of these little gold plates in burials in Greece from like 800 to 300 BC. And on it, it has, the initiate says, I am parched with thirst and perishing. And the spring asked back, then come and drink of me. Sorry, this shouldn't make me emotional. It's just a little reading. Okay. And the spring says, then come and drink of me, the ever-flowing spring, on the right of the white cypress tree. Who are you? Where do you come from? And the initiate says, I am a son of the earth and the starry heavens, but my race is heavenly. My race is heavenly. We forget that on this earth, that we are not of this earth. Our race is heavenly. We will return back to the heavens. So the constellations out there, we set up our little tent and we decided we aren't even going to put the tarp over a tent. It was cold. It got down to 30. But we had our little sleeping bags and our little pads. And then we were just sitting there and the stars started to come out. And we didn't know this. I forgot to put this down. There was a special conjunction between Jupiter and Venus. Isn't that interesting? The father and the mother. And they were almost one in the sky that night. And the moon never came up. And all of a sudden we looked up and we had a little phone that you could look up and see the app. And it was like, oh, there's Leo. And then you take it down and you're like, oh my gosh, that's Leo's head, the 3 on his neck, the 4 of his body, his feet. I could see his tail. You could totally see it with your naked eye. Then we were like, oh my goodness, there is Virgo. I can see Virgo. I can see Spica in her hand. I can see you could totally see the bodies. And then it was like, well, where's the North Star? I can't figure it out. So we were trying to figure it out. And we finally find the North Star, and you realize that the constellations are just moving over you at the night while you're sleeping. It's so amazing. And then we fall asleep, and I woke up a little later, and then I looked up, and I'm like, oh, the clouds have moved in. That's sad. And then I'm like, wait. And I unzipped, there was one other little window over here, and so I unzipped that window, and I realized that the Milky Way was just right over us like a blanket. And I could see all of the Milky Way. Amazing. And it's so interesting when I saw this picture of Christ looking up to the Milky Way. The Egyptians built where they built because the Nile was a reflection of the Milky Way, the way you go back into the heavens. In Peru, I went down to Machu Picchu, and they can see the Milky Way. They have the Southern Star, the Southern Cross. They don't have like the North Star like we do, but they still have the thing, and they believed that you would go up with a bird, with this vulture. Like just in Egypt, the woman would wear the vulture, right? She helps you. But the vulture would take their spirit, and some say down before it goes up. But they know it has to go through the Milky Way. And so here's Christ looking up kind of through that nebulous, kind of Milky Way. And I just think a lot of times, why was it called the Milky Way? Was it the milk, or does it have to do with the mother? The Milky Way. Is she part of the process that we've just forgotten?
Well, the Nile River, it looks like your breasts when your mammary glands. It looks like.
Oh, coming in?
Yeah.
Oh, at the Nile where
Yeah,
it
so-
branches out.
and then-
And they actually put a flower around the breasts of the women. Like they are the flowers of life. They give life. So then this, the temple complex, what I figured out, what happened is they start getting invaded. So as we read the Metna papers, it sounded like there was a group that had gone up north, and they had preserved a lot of the teachings. We know Samuel the Lamanite went down and chastised the Nephites and saying, wait a minute, you guys are going astray, but the arrows didn't hit him. He went off the wall, and he goes back to his land. They think that they were probably north of where they were down there, but in the Metna papers, they had a ceremonial type thing, and in their story, the story is that when Christ comes, that he comes. But unlike the Nephites, that they fall and they all hide from him and there's weeping, they're there ready to receive him. So it's almost as if they were already living more of a Zion-type society, and they could receive him more cleanly. So what happened is they're getting hunted. And I think the Chaco Canyon exists for a period of time where they have these ceremonies and things, and people come from far distance, thousands of miles, to do this trek and to get up there and to receive this purification ceremony. And then what happened, though, is it looks like another tribe, like Nephite. They think maybe Navajo kind of come in and invade because they were more the warriors. And I'm not saying who's who, but eventually this all disappears. But what you find is when you go north, just north, you come to Mesa Verde. And they had to build their homes in the clefts of the hills.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is so amazing. And the only way you can get is through ropes or ladders.
Mm-hmm.
And so very, very difficult. And they're on this mesa with the valleys below. And so they're built on the sides. But they build one thing on the top. And it's the sun temple. And can you see the shape of that sun temple with its kivas? I mean, that I can walk around in, 2 minutes.
Did you not go into the cliff dwellings?
They wouldn't let us. We couldn't do it at that
Oh,
time.
when I was a
I
teenager,
know,
we got to climb the ladders, go in, walk a.
They didn't let
It
us
was
this
amazing.
time.
I've been
Oh.
climbing the ladder.
But you can look at the work, the effort, and
Oh.
that was I think what it was is you ended up with your star priests and their families moving north and hiding in the rocks to keep that knowledge. And they built literally a sun temple on the top that is a mirror image of Pueblo Benito, but smaller. So they could keep, and again, this one's on that equinox line, this flat D. And the other one had a line up the middle, which is the solstice and the winter and summer solstice, where there's no shadow on that wall as it comes up exactly. It also has markings for the moon that would take 18 and a half years to track one moon cycle. And so they know that they were tracking the moon also, one of the only ones that is known anywhere that actually tracked the moon like they did. And with the holes in their walls and the light, the way their windows allowed certain light to come in. Anyway, so that's what I think happened.
So that's as close as you could get.
No, I have some, but you couldn't tell the dimension until,
Oh, okay.
walking up and into them. Yeah, we couldn't get into them. So, but what happened before they left, they took masonry down at Chaco Canyon on their temples, and they masoned in a lot of the doors. They just blocked the doors, and then they set fires. So remember those 200,000 timbers? They burned them. And what they can see is that they wouldn't allow probably people to desecrate their temples. And so they just burned them, and they can see the char marks on the things, but the coverings of all of those kivas are gone, and they were massive. So they can tell from post holes and where they were, how many trees there were. But then they literally, I think they went north and hid in the clefts of the rocks, and they created this smaller sun temple so they could keep their traditions and teachings in the Mesa Verde. And it is very hidden away and very...
You can't see them.
No, they were super smart. So the mystery teachings of the temples and how to enter back into the presence of God were lost in Jerusalem around 600 BC. They were lost in America around 1200 AD. It was restored in part in Europe in the 1100 ADs with the Templars, the Temple men. Not the stories that you see of mad Templars, but the Temple men. So God restored it in our era in 1800 to Joseph Smith as the people were preparing for Zion. But even they did not understand it all, right? Because you're coming with a Catholic or Protestant mind and trying to understand. And so, they just persecuted poor Joseph Smith. Today we need to restore these temple teachings and understand the law of the mother in preparation for the creating of a higher and holier civilization. We can learn from the ancient temple teachings like the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans, the Hopi, the Hebrew, Stonehenge, Angkor Wat. We can use meditation. Just pray to be led to God's teachings and not to man's. So a lot of times they would look at things as pagan, but pagan just meant they were country folk. They didn't, follow their ways. But everything in our archaeological and ancient site has to do with God and how to reach back to God. Because that's the great question. Where did I come from? Where am I going? Is all of this learning for nothing? I'm just going back to dust? That's kind of... So from ancient to modern times, it's the purpose of the temples was return to our heavenly home. And on this one you can see it has the female and the male, right? It has the female and the male. So this would be the wife and Horus and his wife,
What
or
temple
Christ and
is
Mary
that?
Magdalene.
Where was that?
This one, I can't remember. It's not Abu Ghraib.
Well,
Do you
it looks
remember?
like the center pillar too of the tree of life.
And these two right here, these were where the obelisks would have gone that were taken to other countries. So those giant obelisks, and on top they had the pyramid, and they would show the Ben bird. So when the sun would rise in the east, between the two obelisks, the light, those alignment of the doors, the light would go all the way in. They would open the door to the holy place and open the curtains to the Holy of Holies. And later they would have the cherubim on the Holy of Holies in the Hebrew temple. They would open that, and the high priest, the person most worthy, could go in and receive from God for the people like Moses. until we can be able to go in ourselves and being purified. So that's it. We made it through. We made it. And we have power. There we go.
You know, perfect timing.
Oh, good. There we
You,
go.
Bob,
We did
appreciate
it.
it.
All right.
On Latter-day Media, you posted, what's his name that just went and did the Moses, the archaeology actually went there?
Oh, King Godfrey?
Hey Godfrey, go and watch that because it's a Jewish man explaining the.
It's the whole tabernacle right there.
And
The whole, yeah.
Oh,
It's
how
not in
awesome.
Egypt, but it's near Egypt. You cross over where Moses crossed over and it's in the wilderness and it's really cool because you'll glean some new, deeper, and the word mystery is in the Book of Mormon everywhere. Just
Oh,
put it
cool.
in.
So what was the name of the thing?
It's.
K
Go to
Godfrey.
Latter-day Media on
And then
YouTube.
K Godfrey. And
Come
he's
follow
gonna be
us.
doing a whole bunch of videos because he went to, where? Where did he go? 3 places?
Yes, he went to Egypt, Israel, and Jordan.
And Jordan.
Oh, how awesome.
But he's got tons. He was there a whole month.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
he's,
Archaeologist,
yeah,
like,
so that was really cool.
Bonafide historian, ties in church history, ties in.
Oh, how
We have a
fun.
whole Israel tour filmed with him, and we've never put it up.
Oh, my gosh. That's fabulous.
With Asher Ashkenazi, who was the Jewish counterpart of his, that we toured with him together.
Oh, my gosh. How
So-
fabulous.
Got somebody to get that up there.